Hi everyone, I'm Tuğçe Koçoğlu-Hobden, founder of Coaching with Heart and Purpose and host of Light Conversations. I am so excited to introduce you to my fabulous special guest today, Dr. Michael Lennox, psychologist, astrologer, and dream expert, who has been helping people to have a deeper understanding of their unconscious mind for almost 25 years. He is your ambassador to conscious embodiment. He is also affectionately known as the Red Robe Astrologer. If you haven't seen his daily hashtag Red Robe Astrology posts on Facebook and Instagram, you're missing out. You have to go and find them. They are absolutely brilliant. 60 seconds of pure brilliance. Dr. Michael Lennox is also the creator of the Daily Astro Alerts and writer of two dream books, Llewellyn's Complete Dream Dictionary and The Little Book of Dreams. Dr. Michael leads classes, workshops, global meditations, and retreats all over the US and conducts a worldwide private practice from Southern California. He is followed by thousands on social media. Seriously, as I said, you have to go and check him out. His daily posts are brilliant. And he's an incredible teacher. Dr. Michael doesn't know this, but just over a year ago, when lockdown started in the UK, I was, well, actually just before lockdown, I was in the middle of kind of signing up some big contracts with some big corporates for my coaching business. And then COVID hit, right? And then crash, everything came falling down. I had no idea what was going to happen, as many of us didn't. So my contracts were all put on hold. I was then thrown into homeschooling, like many of us were. And whilst out on a run, I was listening to Dr. Michael Lennox on my favorite show podcast, Inspire Nation. And you know the one. And what he said really, really stuck to me. I can't remember his exact words, but it was something along the lines of, it doesn't matter if you've got 1,000 followers or 10 followers. Every bit of energy and upliftment counts. Those words were what inspired me to start Light Conversations. So thank you, Dr. Lennox, and welcome to Light Conversations. I am so honored to have you here on the show.
It is my great pleasure, Tucci. And I got to tell you, I did not know that. You're right. I absolutely did not know that that pandemic land was when you were inspired to do that, or that's something that I offered on that show. I love Michael Sandler too. He's a blast and been a good sport for me. But I even as you were telling that story to introduce me that had happened to you, I got tears in my eyes just thinking about that idea and as it sort of rose up for me the last couple of years of really getting that sort of humble right-sized sense of every ministry counts, whether you're followed by 1 million people and are going to sit on Oprah's couch, or if 3 people are tuning into your little Instagram live and you are uplifting those 3 people, it counts. So thank you for taking those words to heart and then finding a way to serve in the midst of a world that was changing so crazily and rapidly, and many people like you had to change and pivot their plans rather dramatically.
Yes, indeed, we did. Yes, and honestly, yeah, those words have stayed with me, and I'm kind of, I'm living it now. And actually, it's pivoted my business, and so many things, so many opportunities have come through this year, and But before we dive into the interview, I did want to ask you, Red Robe Astrology, where does that name come from?
Oh, it's so funny, honey. It's so kooky. Here it is when you run a business and social media platforms are how you expand your business, there's a lot of like rules you learn along the way about how much you have to engage your audience through social media,
Mm,
posts and clips. When I first started expanding my business in 2018, I was just throwing a lot of spaghetti against the wall. How can I engage? I love to teach, I love to talk. I was doing these long lives with teaching, but that would be very invasive to my day-to-day schedule, and I couldn't keep that up in a way that met the commitment that of every day posting at least once, if not twice, on social media. So I found one day I just sort of fell into this idea of, ooh, I could do a really quick post on Instagram and, oh, look, Instagram copies it to Facebook.
Yes.
Ooh, two birds with one stone. So the minute-long videos weren't like some outward inspiration. It was just like, how can I handle this obligation with the least amount of work? Right? But
Right.
astrology, lends itself to that because it's different every day,
Yeah.
right? And the 1 minute piece of it, Tucci, was just because that's what Instagram limited you to.
Yes.
If you went over 59 seconds, you had to get your people committed to clicking the button and watching you for longer. And people have the attention span of fruit flies. So I'm doing this video thing every day, and people are starting to respond to it, and I'm enjoying it because it's fun and it's easy and it's simple. And I'm wearing my red bathrobe because it's 4:30 in the morning. I get up very early, and
Wow.
I'm making these videos anywhere between 4:30 and 5:30 in the morning. Fresh out of bed with my coffee, wearing my bathrobe.
Yeah.
And so, in this sort of silly moment of trying to engage the social media audience with something personal,
Mm.
which I'm always uncomfortable doing, it was getting warm. I needed a warm weather bathrobe, and I sent out the message to my following: what color bathrobe should I get? Tucci, you would have thought I was trying to solve world peace with the amount of engagement that post got. Like 100 people with, oh, make it red, make it green, make it purple, make it blue. And it's like, wow, people really sort of care somehow.
Amazing.
So I bought this lightweight summer bathrobe that was also red. And that was the birth of Red Robe Astrology. Suddenly it
Very
was like, all right, this is a thing. People are associating me with this idea of wearing the red. Sometimes when people come in for a session, right? They come in for their first astrological reading with me, and they're like, I thought you'd be wearing the robe. It's like, yeah, I'm wearing clothes. Else.
Well,
That's a
exactly. It's
very
like,
long answer to your very short question. It
but I
was
love it.
social media sort of quirk, and it stuck.
Brilliant. I love it. Well, I love it because you engage, you have to engage people, don't we? So in social media, it's all about that engagement. But I love how you kind of pivoted that whole thing around, posting can take forever, right? And I kind of, it's not my favorite medium. So being able to put a 60-second video and engage people, and they're brilliant. I love
Thank
them.
you,
I
Lee.
cannot
And
go
they're
through a day.
purposeful. They're designed to help, and you don't like that. Like the purpose is, if you're sitting around the marketing table with your social media team, the purpose is to get more engagement. But if you look into my heart, the purpose is to help people and serve everybody each day. And how can I do that efficiently and daily in a way that I can sustain, but that also offers information that is valuable to people as they meet their day?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so thank you for doing those daily because they help. They're huge amount of support for people. I definitely benefit from them, and my kids also love you. So like, it's the Red Robe Astrologer, and
They love me because I'm loud and I laugh a lot.
and the fact that you wear a red robe, it's quite unusual, right? So going back to I wanted to just, before we talk about now and astrology and because there's some exciting things happening this week, and I really want to talk to you about that. But if we go back to the end of 2019, I remember listening to you and talking about what 2020, astrologically was going to have in store for us. It was Pluto, death, rebirth, and transformation. Then you talked about, I think it was, let me look, Saturn, yes, the teacher. And they came together in January, saying they're going to come together in January. And boy, did we, and we had no idea, right, what was going to be happening. But I remember listening to that hour of you talking and thinking, wow, how incredible. Did you have any idea at that point how powerful your predictions were going to be for 2020?
The language that I used at the end of 2019, and I remember Michael Sandler in particular, he kept making me repeat it because I said, change and transformation like we've never seen before. And so he'd say, what do you mean? It's like, I don't know, like we've never seen before. And that idea I was very clear about. The idea that no matter what was coming, it was going to be something that we had never seen before on the planet. And I didn't know what that meant, Tucci. I just knew that those were the words that kept coming out of my mouth. And I will tell you that in January, when Australia was burning off the map with wildfires and I mean, I can't even remember the explosions of January. There was an impeachment here in the United States. Suddenly there were these whispers of a virus coming out of the east, and with every passing day in January, me and my astrologer buddy Monique Ruffin would get on the phone and just cackle with the recognition of, wow, this is really going to be really bigger than we've ever seen before on the planet. So I kind of knew, but I also couldn't possibly have known in advance. And that's sort of the juicy thing about being an astrologer. Like, I was never in this game to predict things in advance and be right about things that happen. In fact, during the year when we were moving through a pandemic, I said to a lot of people who would come forward to my weekly teachings, it's like, I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen because how would I know? But I'm going to move through it with you, and I'm going to use astrology to help give us all some context about what's happening and the energies and the rhythms of those energies that are in play, so that we recognize that we're not just falling apart into the chaotic, abyss of death and destruction, but that we're moving through something that has purpose and shape shifting for humanity, and that there are highs and lows of the arc of last year. And that was part of why I was delivering information each day, was to help people navigate. It's different, it's shifting, it's changing, it's not random, and we are not just falling off a cliff. We're actually given an opportunity to change and transform on the individual level and collectively.
Which is what I love about your work, is really it's about how we navigate as human individually as well as collectively, as using those energies that we've got that are going around us, and those up there. And you called 2020 the year of the reckoning. What are you calling 2021?
Well, I'm not. Let's see. Now I got to come up with a good critter. Reckoning. Maybe this is the beginning of the rebirth. I would say that one of the hallmarks of this year, of 2021, is that we're still changing in ways that feel unstable. And one of the big arcs of astrology for 2021 is this square 90-degree angle that represents conflict, because change is happening. That's the nature of a square. And the two planets holding the square, one of them is one of the big players from 2020, which is Saturn, the teacher. So we're still in karmic reckoning of learning how to do this humaning thing a little better. And then Uranus is holding the other part of the square, the lightning flash planet that changes things like instantaneously. So we're still in an enormous amount of unstable reactionary changes to the deep change of transformations that took place last year. So I don't know if rebirth is quite the right word, but we're certainly on a tightrope, feeling a little bit, precarious with how we're moving, and we're still changing, and we have to start moving about in the world again in a way that I think is both confusing and a little scary for some people.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's been a quite a start to the year as well for us. But as we are moving and we are kind of edging towards a slightly more, I guess, what people would call normal way, but
the new normal. That's the sudden, that's the social media tropes of the day are, it's the new normal, but is there really such a thing? And it's like, well, no, not really.
Exactly, not really. And
I think we're still forming it all.
Yes, and this is the start of the age of Aquarius, right? As we are forming something new, and that's the kind of the exciting thing. The old, I think you talked about it, the old structures, right, have been falling down.
And structures that we thought could never change and shift. And one of the comforts that I get to have in my day-to-day is that it's easy for me to think about the long range shifts. Even when I was a little boy, I was thinking a lot about far into the future. And I don't know why I felt those things or had those thoughts. It was just natural for me to think about, 100 years from now, 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now. So when I talk about peace for humanity being possible, I really believe that. But I'm not talking about my lifetime. I'm talking about the lifetimes and generations to come. But the breakdowns that we're experiencing now and the new world that we are building day by day through all of this instability can lead us to peace for humanity in generations to come. And I'm doing the best that I can during my stay here to help other people wake up to their own, healing so that they can usher in a higher vibration and bring about that peace.
Yes, which I love. Yes, it's not going to happen immediately, is it? So we're talking a few hundred years. But you, like you said, you and many people have been brought here or come here, decided to be here at this time to help that process. Right. So it's an exciting time for
I
us.
used to roll my eyes at that idea years ago,
Mm.
like that
Mm.
new age woo trope of like, well, we incarnated at this time to help the planet ascend. And I would roll my eyes and think, what does that even mean? But I believe that fully now. I get it on a much higher level now. It's like, wow, no, no, no. This really is a moment in consciousness, and everyone who is incarnated now did come at this time to assist in this radical shift and change in how consciousness is being embodied on the planet.
Mm. Wow, just hearing you say that just gives me goosebumps. It really does. Yeah, definitely. So, Michael, we seem to have quite an exciting week ahead astrologically coming up, right? Wednesday is, let me get this right, a super flower, blood moon, and lunar eclipse.
And for me, it's just a full moon total eclipse. Like, maybe it's a super and maybe it's got a color and maybe it's got a cultural name. But yes, we are heating up into what I'm going to call the two biggest sort of unstable energetic months of 2021 are May and June, with an emphasis on the second half of May, which we're in right now. And when the sun moved into Gemini last week,
Mm.
that's what sort of got the unstable energy sort of moving faster because we're about to have an eclipse. That's the thing that happens this Wednesday, the 26th, is that we have our first of two eclipses. And eclipses are always more intense with energy. Everything gets amplified and heightened. And the 2 weeks between eclipses are particularly, you know,
Mm.
amplified and intense energies. But add to that the fact that Mercury is going retrograde during eclipse season. So you've got the sun is in Gemini, the North Node, which is the energetic point that helps the eclipses happen, is in
Mm.
Gemini. And then Mercury, the planet of communication, who is one of he rules Gemini. Gemini, the twins who are chatting and yakking up there in consciousness. They invented words and thoughts and ideas. So if the planet that represents how we communicate with words and ideas is turning around and going backward, while we're in eclipse season with the sun in Gemini, we're in for a boatload of instability, bumping into the furniture, all sorts of delays, mechanical breakdowns, definitely back up your computer over the next couple of weeks and all of that, because it really is going to be certainly a bumpy ride between the eclipses. Gemini energy is our thinking process. And
Mhm.
so when you've got Mercury in retrograde in that sign and the eclipse energy, people are going to be more prone to anxiety, monkey mind, too much thinking, overthinking, all of the challenges that any of your listeners are, hearing this and think, well, where's your neck up challenges? Is it in your listening? Is it in your communication? Is it
Mm.
having a strong boundaries? Is it about negotiations you're currently involved in? Anything that uses your mind and your words and your thoughts is going to be particularly unstable for the next 2.5 weeks.
2.5 weeks, right? Okay, we that's quite
Well,
a
and
time.
then, then beyond that, we can even go a little further than the Mercury retrograde in the 2 weeks in between eclipses, because part of what's happening in June
Yeah,
is that square I described between Saturn, the teacher, and
yeah.
Uranus, the great awakener. sort of waking us up to higher levels of awareness and teaching us hard lessons, but in a difficult and unstable way, that peaks in the first 2 weeks of June while Mercury is doing its backward movement while we have eclipses. It's like every way you turn for the next, say, I'm going to say 2 to 6 weeks, we're in a lot of uncomfortable possibilities, a lot of healing and release, and a lot of confusion and difficult communication.
Wow. Okay, we've got quite a lot going on there, haven't we then? And I reckon that, well, from my personal perspective, things were starting on Friday for me. I know you talk about a shadow, the retrograde shadows. Friday, my communications, everything was going wrong. Oh my goodness, my internet, my broadband connections, my things weren't even being sent to emails. I was like, what's going on? It's like Mercury retrograde.
It's particularly juicy. Like I replaced my computer and all of my sound equipment this month. And I moved heaven and hell to make sure that everything was done by the 13th of May, because it was the 14th of May that Mercury entered his shadow. So I was like, all right, I'm an astrologer, don't know what I'm thinking about replacing my equipment at this time, but it needed to happen. It was kind of important. So I got it done. And still I had a breakdown. My brand new computer stopped charging on the third or fourth day. I fixed it. It took a day and a half. I was on the phone with service. It was frightening as all get out. But what it tells me that I can share with your audience is this one counts. This is going to be a bumpy Mercury retrograde, and just know that. Dot your I's, cross your T's, back up your hard drive, and try not to buy anything electronic.
Brilliant. And does it have any a further impact with it being in Gemini, as whose ruler is Mercury as well? So does that have that sort of a greater amplification in terms of the energies?
Yes, because there is this thing called disposition, that planets in certain signs give their disposition to the ruler of that sign. Meaning, when the sun is in Gemini, though the sun is doing its sun-like things, which is governing or reflecting our conscious awareness, what we're aware of, how we're aware of it, because of the Mercury rulership of Gemini, then anything that Mercury is doing is felt more acutely by the sun consciousness, right? So the sun consciousness means us as individuals being aware. So if in our awareness of, say, communication, Mercury is moving around backwards, then it's double intensified, because it's not only is Mercury, our thinking, backward, our conscious awareness is confused, because our conscious awareness is being dictated during these 4 weeks of Gemini season by the movement of Mercury.
Got it. And we've also got this square with.
That's right.
with
square building that says unstable occurrences, things that come out of nowhere. When Uranus is in the house, we have to say anything can happen and probably will. And that's the juice of Uranus, is that nobody can predict what Uranus will bring except change.
Right. So the only what's the word I'm looking for? The constant here is change.
The only constant is change.
Brilliant. So gosh, we have lots to look out for, people. So it's interesting.
One of the benefits of all of this Gemini energy, though, is that it allows our thinking mind and our writing mind and our interactive communication sort of mechanism to be the best way to navigate the unknown things that are going on, the unconscious stuff that's going on. In other words, your journaling practice is more effective when all of this Gemini is present, although you might have to journal your way through the chaotic, irrelevant thoughts to get to the nugget of what's below the surface of your unconscious. But there's value in the Gemini energy when it comes to investigating how your thinking process is working.
Brilliant. So even more journaling around this particular retrograde than
writing is your friend in Gemini season, even if it's just like this.
Yeah.
Gemini season in general tends to have a shadow artifact of too much thinking, too many words, too much chaos in thought.
Mm.
That's amplified right now by the eclipse and the Mercury retrograde energy. So if that's true or accurate, if that resonates with anybody who's listening, the journaling process during this rest of May and early June could simply be the discharging of the chaotic thoughts. That journaling can be very valuable as a tool, where you wake up and your mind is filled with chaotic thoughts. If you scribble for a couple of minutes and just download all those chaotic thoughts in a very Gemini sort of way, you might be able to approach the rest of your day with a little bit of a clearer head.
Brilliant. Yes. I mean, I for myself and for my clients, I do a lot of with journaling, something I always recommend. And actually, yes, this month it seems like amping that up a level is probably a good idea. And actually, I've been a bit naughty the last week or so. I haven't been doing my morning journaling as I normally do. And yes, I think with the clarity piece you mentioned, it's so important. My son is a Gemini, so it's going to be quite an interesting one. He is.
Yeah, that'll be fun to watch his little mind explode during the next 6 weeks.
Yes, and he's your typical Gemini, so he's very chitty chatty. Going back to the full moon though, just and the lunar eclipse that we've got. Quick, what would you recommend for listeners and viewers out there in terms of a kind of a full moon ritual or full moon, thing? What would you do?
Let's start with the notion that all full moons are an opportunity to release. It's
Mm.
in the new moon when the sun and moon are together that we're planting seeds of intention. And then the full moon is the moment when we think of harvesting the benefit, like what's the value of what we've been working on. And you can think of the light of the full moon as being brightly lighting up the unconscious, and we get to see, ooh, here's what I'm grateful for having created already. So it's very important in every full moon ritual to put some attention on gratitude for that which you have already created, which in the farming analogy, the
Mhm.
full moon of harvesting the benefit is, if you cut down the wheat berry, that becomes the benefit. Look what I made. I planted this seed. It grew something I can eat. Yummy, yum. That's the benefit. But then we leave the chaff behind. We leave a whole bunch of stuff in the field, as we take the benefit that we've harvested, and that becomes the release mechanism that every full moon is. I put way more attention on this as
Mm.
a psychologist who's trying to help people embody their unconscious and their conscious embodiment experience. What we want to do in every full moon is let go of material from our unconscious processes that we are done with, habits and patterns, self-destructive behaviors,
Mm.
things that don't serve us, challenges of boundaries and religion. The list goes on and on. Whatever it is you're working on, every full moon is an opportunity to let go of the stuff you're trying to free yourself of.
Mm.
When it's an eclipse, it has even more power to assist energetically in allowing us to release stuff. Because the sun's in Gemini, there's this is back to the idea of words as being a good tool. Not all lunations favor using your mind to figure things out. Like there's no water in this full moon. It's an air
Mm.
sign where the sun is and a fire sign where the moon is, Sagittarius. So therefore, using your mind, your thought, and your intellect to identify the truths that you have learned about yourself. Now we're in the Sagittarius element, the archetype where the moon is opposite Gemini, is we have a connection to all the ways we think in Gemini, but in Sagittarius, we're trying to build a higher truth or a higher belief system on which to base our movement in life. So we're trying to write it. Sagittarius is the sign of the seeker, of
Mhm.
seeking higher ground, a spiritual way, of seeking the truer true way that allows you to be more free and expressive because you've dropped your emotional baggage along the way. So because the writing is available through the Gemini archetype, even just making a list of all of the things you're ready to be let go of. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably got some ideas about how your consciousness works, and we're talking to the initiated here, people who understand the process of investigating how they operate in the world, so that they can let go of traumatized experiences from our younger lives that cause these patterns of behavior. So if we write them down using the Gemini energy, then I would add some fire element to your ritual, because the moon in Sagittarius is a fire sign. And if you want to release some stuff, spend some time writing all the stuff you're looking to let go of, all the patterns and habits, all of the emotional blockages. Even if you don't know what it is you want to release, you can formulate a prayer that says, I am ready to release anything and everything, known and unknown, conscious and unconscious, that blocks me from rising to the highest level of my self-expression. Write that down and then burn it. Light it, really, literally. You light a candle, you have a little ash receptacle, you write it out. That becomes your symbol to your unconscious that you are really ready to transform. The fire takes the paper and turns it into carbon, as if to say, I can build something anew because I've let go of this idea fully.
Yeah, brilliant. I hadn't put the two together, actually, burning with when it's in a fire sign as well. So I was like, oh yes, now I get it.
You always want to go where the moon is and check the element. And if the moon's in a fire sign, light a candle at the very least. And in this particular eclipse, don't burn the house down.
Yes, things could go terribly wrong around this one. So yes, be very careful, listeners and viewers, because this is a tricky time at the moment. But I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think I often do burn a candle and have a candle, but yes, I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to what elements we are in. So all retrogrades this year are in, or Mercury, retrogrades are in air signs, aren't they, this year?
Yes. Interesting observation. Yes.
Yeah.
And that does characterize the year as a year where we are adjusting our thinking and our perception mechanism. That's what the mind is. If you think about the solar system itself as a being, right? The sun is just the conscious awareness center of us that never changes. And it's Mercury, the first little planet zipping around the sun, that is our thinking. So they're not the same thing. Conscious awareness and our thinking and our perception is not the same thing. And last year, our conscious awareness was radically transformed. The world changed. And so I think it's interesting, in the year after the Great Reckoning and the Great Change, that Mercury is going retrograde in all air signs, all three of them, by the time the year is over, allowing all of our thinking and our perception at the individual level to sort of catch up with the shifts and the changes that are happening on the planet.
Wow.
It's important that it's all in air signs, because there's value in that, because air is akin to thinking, and we are all thinking too much for our own good.
Yes. Oh wow, when you phrase it like that, that's makes so much sense. And I love the way you talk about how consciousness, how the planets represent, I guess, us, right, and how we are, and how our behaviors and how they influence on that. And I think that makes it just people understand it so much more, so better or clearer, doesn't it?
Yeah,
when you explain
hopefully, that's certainly my intention, is to help teach people in astrology that the planets aren't separate from us. They're reflecting us. And so that if Mercury is reflecting all of our thinking, and Mercury out there is shifting by moving backwards and doing a little underbelly visit to the unconscious, then every single person on the planet is having their experience of their thinking mechanism visiting the unconscious and then popping up the other side, shifted, changed, or transformed.
Yeah. And are there any other retrogrades, other planetary retrogrades happening this year that are significant? Because we always hear talk about Mercury and hear about Mercury, but I just wondered if there was anything interesting.
as an astrologer in general, I don't put a lot of stock on the sort of the big retrogrades in terms of impacting all of us. It's not that Saturn going retrograde or Pluto going retrograde is something that we don't feel, we do. But if from my vantage point as an astrologer who has spent, 2.5 decades reading astrology and feeling how it feels in my body and seeing how it works in other bodies, I have never been struck by like the slower planetary retrogrades as something we really needed to pay attention to. They make really good memes. They get attention.
Yeah.
Some astrologers meme like 3 planets retrograde. It's changing how you manifest. It's like, yeah, no. Kind of like, imagine if the wind was blowing from the east to the west one day, and then the next day it changed and it was blowing from the west to the east. Do you think you could walk out your front door and be like, oh my God, the wind has changed? You wouldn't. You wouldn't even notice. It'd just be like, there's a little wind. You wouldn't be like, oh, no, it's coming from the left. We got to do it differently. That to me is the slower planetary retrogrades. Now, here's where it does count. When a planet that is going direct or retrograde changes directions and your natal chart, your personal chart is actually moving through a significant transit from that planet, you're going to feel that retrograde. But if I'm speaking to 100 people about Pluto going retrograde, which he did about 2 weeks ago, 20 people in that audience are going to have a shift in their experience because the planet that was touching their chart was changing directions. But even those 20 won't know why.
Right.
And for the rest of us, it's just kind of like the wind shifted direction a little bit. It's like Jupiter is the planet of abundance and expansion. And it's through his movement that we are reflecting our relationship to things getting bigger and better. You might see a meme that says Jupiter's going retrograde, so manifestation changes completely, except that wouldn't be true. We manifest with our thoughts in a disciplined, focused direction. We align them with our felt experience of what we think it would be like to attract that thing. And we stay the path, and we allow the vision to change and morph, so we're not attached to the form. And that's how manifestation works. It doesn't work differently when Jupiter is retrograde than it does when he's direct. And I would be hard pressed to find anybody who could walk out their porch and say, the wind is coming from the left or the wind is coming from the right. So that's sort of my non-answer to your question about.
But no, thank you, because it's something that I don't. Yeah, we're here at Mercury, and I'm always very interested in what's happening with Mercury. And I thought,
because the personal planets going retrograde are really important to pay attention to, because they're the personal planets.
Yeah.
Mercury touches every single human beings and other beings too, but we'll just talk about the human beings, every mind. Yeah. Venus is going retrograde at the end of this year, and she went retrograde last year. That means how we live in our hearts is radically being changed by those 2 retrogrades. That's a very significant retrograde. Last year, Mars went retrograde. And so how we embodied our walk of life changed, and he did it in his own sign of Mars. And there was tremendous violence and disruption from Mars's retrograde in Aries last year. The justice movement was part of Mars's retrograde. Now, those are retrogrades worthy of talking about at great length, because those are retrogrades that every single human being is going to be different from the beginning to the end of a retrograde cycle like that. But not the case with the slower, the social, and the outer planets in a way that makes it worthy of me spending a lot of time talking to you. Now, listen, if you were interviewing an astrologer who aligned with these retrogrades more passionately and spoke different words about how to perceive the retrogrades, they would be just as right as I am. Because astrology is vast, it's all energy, and retrograding planets do change energy. I'm just not passionate about it. So I'm not going to be like, oh, yes, amazing, where someone else might feel passionately about the distinctions between Pluto moving direct and Pluto moving backward outside of it hitting a personal chart transit. So that's
Got it.
there you have it. Yeah.
So where we have Mercury though, so would you say, so it's obviously it's we're on our heads, is it a good time for people to just to drop into their heart center a little bit more and just to kind of slow down a bit, because we know Mercury is monkey mind, you mentioned it earlier, right? It's chat.
Well,
Woo!
that would certainly be the ideal. I think that one of the things that one could say about late May and the first half of June is that act that you just described will be difficult. It will be harder to drop into the feeling space without being also attached to the chaotic thinking space. And maybe that's even some of the purpose of the eclipses and the Mercury retrograde is if the planet that reflects how we think is visiting the unconscious and he's in his own sign that tends to keep us, thinking too much, it can absolutely be part of the desired outcome of this tumultuous time to free yourselves from overthinking as a kind of intention. And
Yes.
certainly a full moon in Sagittarius, while Mercury's getting ready to go retrograde in Gemini, it's a great moment to think about how ready am I to let go of thinking and drop into feeling.
So it feels like instead of, going on this kind of rampage of doing and keep just going, it's try and pull back and be. I certainly will up I'm a Kundalini yoga teacher as well. So that's my morning practice, and I will make sure that I really step into that.
I did not know that about you. And so let us talk about the connection between Gemini and the lungs. Gemini infected the lungs and breath. And so, as you well know, and for those of you who are listening, if you know this or not, Kundalini yoga is much more connected to the breath mechanism than Hatha yoga is. And it's all about stimulating the embodiment through breath. I am a big believer in breath work. I am masterful at my own relationship with breath and breath work. And so I would even go so far as to say the go-to tool for the next couple of weeks is probably breath work.
Breath work, yes.
To release the mind rather than dropping into the feeling state to release the mind, because as I said earlier, that's going to be difficult to do over the next couple of weeks. But the breath allows the body to release itself from the grip of the mind. That's the beauty of emphasizing breath. So I'm glad you brought up being a Kundalini yoga teacher, because this is the season for breathing.
Yes.
As a tool.
As a tool, absolutely. Yes. I mean, breath work as a tool. Breath, we say in Kundalini to control the breath is to control the life, right? It is such an important aspect of everything. And I feel like the way you've just linked that, incredible. Yes. Let us breathe and not forget. Because I feel like sometimes you sit there going, reading emails and, we hold our breath, this is just.
Well, yeah, and most people don't even know that they're holding their breath intermittently throughout the day. But it's the first thing that happens when the amygdala gets fired up, which is that part of the brain that governs the flight fight response.
Yeah.
And so one of the challenges of modern urban living is all of our amygdalas are fired up telling us we're in danger when we're really not.
Yeah.
And we call that stress.
Yeah.
Right. And so breath is the thing that can dispel that, can just break it right up.
Absolutely. Yes. We come out of that fight, flight, and freeze response, don't we? And we kind of that parasympathetic nervous system activated. Suddenly we can see then the opportunities and what's available to us, right? We suddenly.
Well, that's right. You just nailed it. Then we can see the opportunity. But if we are overwhelmed with the stress, we can't see anything. But breath is the great leveler.
Exactly. Brilliant. And so we've got this much retrograde. We've got one in October as well, October, November. So that's the same. And you mentioned Venus at the end of the year. That's another one that you mentioned that's an important one, because how did you these are personal planets, did you say? They're personal planets
Yes,
they refer
yes.
to.
So
Yeah.
let's for the less initiated, let's break this down
Yeah.
for a second. There are three sort of bands in the solar system of planetary distinction: the personal planets, the what we call the social planets, and then the outer planets. So the personal planets are the immediate close to the sun. So it's the sun itself, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and the dance between the sun and the moon.
Hmm.
And so, in our sense of being in bodies, physical bodies, that's our connection to Mars. To have an emotional body, a way of receiving information from your environment and how our emotions guide us, that's our connection to Venus. Venus reflects the emotional body. Our
Mm.
mental body and our thinking mechanism is reflected by Mercury's movement. And then our spiritual body, our auric field, is akin to the dance that happens between the sun and the moon. So in this trope of a four-body system, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies, if you were looking at the solar system as a being,
Mm.
that being would be the center of the solar system in those bodies, those planets, the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual bodies. Now, if you think about your higher self or your transpersonal self or your godlike self or your, soulful self,
Yeah.
the outer planets of Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto connect us to those energies that are collective, that are not individual. So if we connect to power and authority and gravitas and the shadow and the unconscious and death and rebirth, that's not individual, that's collective. We all die and get reborn. So
Mm.
Pluto, as the planet of death, is part of that transpersonal outer higher self consciousness. Uranus brings change and lightning and awareness of higher thought. And Neptune brings the spiritual body and the connection to God, whatever your language for that is. And then
Mm.
the middle band of planets are the planets that reflect our social life and our governments and our boundaries and our experience, interacting in cultures and townships and cities. And that's Saturn and Jupiter. Saturn brings the structure, Jupiter brings the expansion. Saturn is the have tos, Jupiter is the get tos. And so those three demarcations um, show up very differently in our felt experience.
Hmm.
So if a social planet is active, the world is changing in terms of how we move about the planet, right? So last year, one of the big things about 2020 was the outer planet of Pluto brought death and rebirth, but
Mm.
Saturn, the social planet, said, and that death and rebirth is hitting the social fabric of everything on the planet,
Right.
right? So you're starting to get the picture of the outer and the
Yes.
social. So now, when the interpersonal planets go retrograde, that is a big deal for every single person on the planet. Because if Mercury does something, my mind and your mind will feel that.
Right.
Pluto does something, I'm only going to feel it if Pluto's touching my chart that year.
Got it. Mm.
But Mercury's
Subtle.
movement, every single thinking being on the planet. When Venus goes retrograde, any retrograde cycle is akin to that planet's consciousness visiting the unconscious territories. And when they're able to do work on how we express, that's unconscious, so that when the planet comes out of retrograde, we're different, we've shifted. So
Mm.
when Mercury's doing it, it's how we communicate, how we govern our thoughts and our expressions. And this happens with quite great sort of frequency, 3 times a year, every 80 days for 22 days, that happens. Venus's retrograde isn't as clockwork or regular. It happens every 2 or 3 years. It so happens, though, and this is rare, that she went retrograde last year and she's going retrograde again this year.
Mhm.
That means how we give and receive love is changing,
Right.
right? So when Mercury goes retrograde, how we think and express is changing. When Venus goes retrograde, how we give and receive love is changing. And she did that in the middle of last year, and she does it again at the end of this year. What that tells
Mm.
me on the planet where all of us have to learn how to give and receive love in a new way, because we're being confronted with what appear to be unloving experiences interacting with each other. And all of us have to learn how to open our hearts when the heart would otherwise want to close up. And Venus's retrograde at the end of the year takes place in the sign of Capricorn, which is very much about learning and lessons. It's a sign that is ruled by Saturn. Mm-hmm. So the great teacher is telling Venus what he expects of her at the end of the year, December, January of 2022, which is open the heart even more, even though it feels scary and vulnerable to do so. Saturn, the teacher, says you have to.
Which means, therefore, then we all have to, because we are which one of our personal planets. So we are being asked to That's open right. and receive and love even more, because we clearly haven't learned the lesson from last year.
Love in moments where it's tricky to know how to do that.
You mentioned a square. Is this when you talk when you talk about the shouting or the arguments between walls and floors?
Yeah.
I just picture walls and floors arguing about stuff.
Right. It occurred to me that, I had a teacher once, Stephanie Azaria. She came up with a good way to describe squares as stepping stones. They set up conflicts and obstacle energies that we have to process and navigate. It's the idea of like, I want to get to the other side of the river, and there are stepping stones I can cross, but they're unevenly spaced. They're, far apart. They're also wet and covered with moss, which means that as I go, I might trip and slip.
Yeah.
So that's a behavioral way of understanding what's going to be present when two planets are holding this 90-degree angle with each other. But when I added the floor wall piece to the model, people seem to get it a little bit more, because they get this idea. Your floor and your wall right now, right where you sit, are arguing with each other at the top of their lungs. The floor is yelling to the wall, lie down, you're doing it wrong. And the wall is saying, nope, you're doing it wrong. Stand up already, right? Because they each say, this is the way you do it.
Right, yeah.
But neither can win the argument. If the floor wins or the wall wins, the building falls down, right? So the idea of a square also says two things that are completely disparate, separate feeling and contradictory energies are grabbing your attention at the same time. So the square of 2021 is Saturn says there are going to be lessons that will be hard, that we have to approach them slowly and carefully and build a new world brick by brick. Meanwhile, Uranus is in the house saying, light and flash here, light and flash there, light and flash there, changing fast, unstable, unstable. What's sort of the same thing? Saturn wants us to be smarter. Uranus wants us to be woke. But they do it so differently, and we can't escape either the slow, steady, hard lessons of building a new world, while dodging the fast lightning flash moments of instability that says it's changing faster than I can build the new world. But nobody wins. Saturn doesn't say, oh, Uranus, you slow down. And Uranus says, okay, I will. Uranus says, no way.
And I guess we don't want them to win, do we? We don't want them to win. We want that tension to be there, right? We want that.
They can't. What we want is to get big enough in our consciousness to be able to handle both at the same time.
Wow. So that's in June and December. So we've got some. Is there anything else that, I know we haven't got very long left. Is there anything else that is something to look out for the next 6 months?
Well, I will say that we are in the big peak of the year's most sort of challenging processes is absolutely May and June, right? So we are in probably the most unstable. Then once we get into the past May and June, we move through a bit of a quieter summer. And it starts to sort of, heat up again, similar to now as we get into the very end of the year. And why? Because we've got another eclipse season. We've got, our third, Mercury retrograde, and the final square between Saturn and Uranus sort of hits all at the end of the month. So I would say we're getting through a rough spring. We get a bit of a break, but trust me, when we get to like late November, December, and as we cross over the threshold between this year and next year, we're in a lot of unstable shift and change.
Wow.
Yeah, so rock'em sock'em year in total. We're in the second big wave. Then we get a little bit of a lull and a little bit of a rest. And then things heat up again at the very tail end of the year when we go through our second eclipse this season.
Okay, wow. So that'll be another conversation then, Dr. Michael
Yes,
Lennox.
it will, honey.
We'll have to catch up again. But is there anything else that you would like to share with listeners in the last couple of minutes that we've got together? Your perhaps maybe.
Listen,
Mm.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say perhaps your work, whether other work that you're currently doing that you'd like to share.
Oh, sure. First of all, if you're, find me on Instagram or Facebook and start watching my, Red Robe astrology videos. On Instagram, my handle is Dr. Lennox Dreams, DrLennox Dreams. On Facebook, I'm Astrology with Dr. Michael Lennox. So that's a definite great way to not only keep up with, me, but also what's happening on a day-to-day basis. michaellennox.com is my website, and if astrology is new to any of your listeners, I think the advice that I would have over, for the rest of the year is follow the moon. Start paying attention to what it feels like to you when you see on social media that we're in a new moon. Those are moments to set intentions and just, lock in how you want your life to go as you move forward. And then when we get to full moons like we're about to in the eclipse, that's a full moon on Wednesday. You be in mind of what you want to let go of and release so that you can have the life of your dreams as well. If you did nothing more than that, you would be dialing into a rhythm of how consciousness is flowing already. The sun and the moon are already doing these gatherings, and we feel that energy. When you match the sun and the moon's movement with your intentions, now you're starting to cook with gas.
Beautiful. Yes, and just start listening, start paying attention to those, to our bodies, to what's going around in our and feels, right? Feelings and the energies around us, because it's quite powerful. And I've got all your details, so I'll put them all on the bottom of the podcast and the YouTube channel, so everyone can find your details. And huge thank you.
My pleasure.
Huge thank. I'm absolutely honored. It's been so wonderful, and I've been waiting for this for so long. So thank you. It's been incredible.